Good afternoon, I'm Alex with the Rialta Owners Group of America, and in today's video we're going to discuss the changing of the spark plugs and the wires on your Rialta. You have to understand that there are special tools that are made to remove and put the wires back on so that you don't cause damage, but we'll talk more about that as we go on. Looking at the motor compartment on this 1999 QD, which is the late model, so it's actually a 1999 Eurovan chassis as well, you can see down here, just barely, is the coil pack. The wires that come off that go to the looms. The looms are the small cast plastic heat resistant holders of these wires that keep them off of the engine, and then they go to the various spark plugs. In order to access all of the spark plugs, it is necessary to disassemble and move some things around. First and foremost, if we remove the screws on the front top of the radiator on both sides, you can actually move this section forward so that it comes away so that you expose the front of the motor. To get the plugs in the back, not so easy. Take a couple of pictures before you start, but then you actually need to remove the air intake so that you can get to where the wires lead to the spark plugs. Here's an example of a spark plug wire removal tool made specifically for the Volkswagens and Audis. They share similar wiring setups and systems. It's set up in such a manner that the end of the tool clips onto the boot, which is the end of the wire that goes over the spark plug, and allows you to remove it safely without yanking on the wire. Yanking on the wire using pliers will damage those wires in such a manner that they're useless. You'll have a misfire and a code, and you'll need to buy a whole brand new set of wires. So it's worth the investment. This one was bought online. It actually cost less than $15, and even if it only works once, that's enough to get the job. Although you don't need $1 million worth of tools in order to service your Rialta or any other vehicle, there is a certain number of tools that you will have to rely on a regular and consistent basis while doing your maintenance. It's good to have a decent socket wrench set, bunches of different sizes including spark plugs, small extensions, and smaller sizes for smaller areas. You can't always get the big wrench into the small areas, and there are some nuts where even though you can get a small wrench in there easily, it doesn't have the leverage necessary to get it out. So having a variety of sizes, both in standard and metric, is something that's rather important. You have to remember that even though the Eurovan was manufactured in Europe and would be metric, the body itself, the Winnebago, was manufactured in the United States, and it does have some standard measurements on it. So both metric and standard in a basic socket set that you can pick up. A small selection of pliers, light duty, meant for crimping and pulling and holding things in place. Several different sizes of screwdriver, although the simple universal all-in-one screwdriver will work very well to accomplish that same job because it has the different tips on it. That'll work just fine. We have some Allen wrenches, which are the hex wrenches. They're square all the way around. And we have the ones that are called stars or torques, and those are the star-shaped ones that are on the end that you will find need for underneath the hood. A pan to hold our parts so we don't lose anything. You might have need for a small power drill to get things off, long screws and so forth, gets them out more easily. Just a light duty hammer. You don't need a sludge hammer, and I have a block of wood in case I need to knock something aside. I'm not damaging the surfaces. I also have masking tape, a permanent marker, and bungee cords. Well, what would that be for? Well, if I'm taking apart two ends of a connection, and there's multiple connections, I can label each connection and write the number on it so I know that this goes to this and this goes to this before I take them apart. I also take photographs with my cell phone camera so that I can make sure that I have a document of how things are supposed to look when they're done. The bungee cords, well, for example, if I'm only going to take off one side of the air intake, I can actually loop this around the other side and pull it up gently up and out of the way so I don't have to disassemble anything completely in most cases. There's other things such as hoses and radiators and so forth that are on these hinges that you may need to pull out of the way, and the bungee cord is a soft, gentle way of putting retraction on those so that those are out of your way. Last but not least, our specialty tool, which is made for the job that we're doing. In this case, we're talking about the spark plug wires themselves. One last thing that I always do is I always have a good pair of utility gloves on my hands to protect myself from the sharp edges and the corners. It's always better to cut your glove in a greasy, dirty environment than it is your fingers. Being a lifelong paramedic, I'm prone to be a little cautious where there's a possibility of getting injuries and infections. So the gloves are always a good idea. You can also use the small rubber gloves, and they actually make very strong rubber gloves that you can buy in the auto parts stores that are more durable than the regular latex gloves you might be able to buy at a pharmacy. These are specifically made for mechanics. They're hypoallergenic in most cases, and when you're done with them, you just toss them away. These last a good long time, and I don't mind washing these in a bucket outside. Let's talk a little bit more about proper disassembly and reassembly processes. If, for example, I was going to remove this entire part, and I want to make sure that it goes in the right place, in the right position, in the right order, I just start off with some masking tape and a permanent marker. I do the same numbers on both sides with an arrow facing both directions. I may need to clean up the parts a little bit before I put the tape on so that it sticks properly. When I put that down on this side, I put this one down on this side. Now, not only do I put the right two components together, but I can realign them to exactly where they were supposed to be before I started doing the disassembly in the first place. When you're done putting the numbers on everything that you're going to disassemble, document it by taking pictures with your cell phone, and you should have no problem putting it back together. Okay, now this is going to be one of those cases where you're going to say to yourself, what the heck did I just see? Well, in the interest of saving time, I sped that up a little bit. But what I did first is I used the star tool and I removed the fastener from inside the center of the emblem, and then the two screws on either side, and removed the grill and took that out of my way so I don't put any pressure on that plastic. When those break, they can't be fixed. You have to buy new ones. Then I took out the 4 bolts that held in the radiator, and using my bungee cord, I've pulled that forward. It gives you just enough room so you can get inside. Then what I did is I loosened up the hose clamps that are on the air intake chamber here. There's a specific name for it. Let's just call it the air intake. And then I've lifted that out of the way without unplugging anything else besides the 2 ends and the 2 hoses that go to it. What I've been able to do because of that is I've been able to expose all 6 cylinders at the top so I can get my tool to them, which is what we need to do today. If you look at the end of the specialty tool, there's some slots, there's some teeth. These are all meant to interlock with the end of the spark plug wire so that you can pull it out safely without putting any tension on the wire itself, which will destroy the filaments that are inside. So, with this open as it is, we're going to go down until we just fit over the top of that boot. We're going to turn a little bit so we lock the teeth in on the plug. We're going to give it a gentle pull. That's what you should hear. Disengage your tool. Set that aside. Now, if you're just changing spark plugs, this is all you need to do. You do one at a time. Get your spark plug tool, go inside, extract your spark plug. Make sure you put the new one in, make sure it's gapped, make sure that it goes in straight, make sure you don't cross thread. And then return one and do one at a time. This way you're not mixing and matching wires up and getting any confusion. If you're changing the wires, I also recommend that you do them one at a time. Since they come pre-engineered like this, and if it's the proper set from the proper manufacturer, OEM type parts, they're actually going to be labeled for the cylinder that it goes to. In this case, this one has a number 5. I've pulled the number 5 spark plug wire. So I go to my package, I pull out the other number 5, and I put it in, and I follow it at space in the loom. So we'll disconnect it from the loom. And then for the coil pack end, you just need to make sure you have a firm grasp on it and pull it off using your fingers. Now, what's happening inside with this tool, remember I was pointing out the locking teeth that are in place there? Well, what you're doing is you're going down along the inside here to these notches. And when you get to these notches, you're turning the tool, you'll feel it tap. You're turning the tool and it grabs that notch so that when you pull, you're pulling out using the metal boot. You're not putting any tension on the wire itself. This is extremely important. When you're installing the wires back in, You start off at the coil end, run the wire through the loom, and then with your hands slide this down on top of the spark plug, make sure that it's in place, and you're actually going to push on the edge of the boot with your tool like this. If you go down inside to lock in and push in, you may wind up pushing past this point in the hub on the spark plug boot, and when you go to pull the tool back out, no matter how much twisting you do, you're going to keep pulling the wire back out. So pull from the midsection, reinstall by gently pushing from the top. There is a little rim there to protect you from putting pressure on the wire. Make sure you're on it, make sure you're using plenty of light, and you shouldn't have any problems. Well, the camera actually overheated during that last segment of the time-lapse reassembly of the Rialta, as did I, who expected near 90-degree temperatures at the end of September in Niagara Falls. I certainly didn't, which brings me to my safety reminder. Always make sure that you have someone nearby whenever you're working on your vehicle. It's always a good idea to have a safety person nearby, either to lend assistance should there be an emergency, or an extra hand to help you get something together properly, even just to remind you to hydrate during hot temperatures so that you don't create a medical issue. Don't stress about doing these repairs. The more often you do them, the more time you take to understand what you're doing, the better and faster you're going to be. This is all part and parcel to keeping your Rialta in good operating condition. In our next video, we're going to discuss the charging systems that you can use while your vehicle's in storage to make sure that when you want to take your Rialta out, it's ready for you. For the Rialta Owners Group of America, I'm Alex. Have a great day.